All right, so very small group tonight, but there's about 24, or not 24, about 12 people online right now as well, watching the presentation at home, and so I'm going to keep talking up here. So we're just going to focus a lot on information tonight. We're going to go over some of the things to know for the year ahead, and we'll probably make this a short meeting then, just to keep going, get done around 7:05, 7:30, not 7:30, not 7:30. That'd be late. So try to wrap up around 7:35, 7:05 words. Anyways, hello, I'm William Hiley. For those at home who can just hear me, welcome to Family Faith Formation for the year ahead. I've got my magical clicker. I've got a presentation, some things to go through to get you set up for what's coming in this year, because obviously it's probably a different start to a school year than you've ever had. And so faith formation is going to look a little bit different as we try to accommodate and navigate the world around while still doing some high quality stuff with preparing children and adults to know and grow in their faith this year. So here's our objectives for this brief meeting. By the end of this, pardon me if I look at the slides, I want you to be able to know, whether you're online or here, if that you are in fact ready to be, so that, yeah, we can get off on the right foot. You should be able to therefore describe some of your options for family faith formation this year, whether you can go online or in person, and as well to start considering then the role of faith in our lives. We're going to be exploring throughout September, both online and in person, the role of faith, what it is exactly, and what it leads us to in our lives. So, by my estimation, you're here because you have some connection with the church. I may not know what that is. I may not have, I haven't gotten to know you yet, for many of you, and that's exciting to me because I get to know lots of people in my particular line of work. If you're unsure what you're doing here, don't worry. This is a learning year for everybody. So we're all in this together, learning together, growing together. So let's start by figuring out what St. Matthew's has lined out for family faith formation programs for the year ahead. So I created this matrix. It'll be a little easier for the folks at home to see than the folks here in person. We have several options. For one, you can, in the pre-K through 5 world, we prepare for First Communion, as well as just general family faith formation for grades pre-K through 5. So the way this works is that pretty much everyone is enrolled in general pre-K through 5 formation, and then First Communion comes along as almost an add-on in addition to this. So as I was saying, First Communion is kind of an add-on to family faith formation. Understandably, most folks who are going to be here this year then are going to be here looking for First Communion or something else. If you're not, that's okay. We've got great stuff lined out for you too. But for this part then, I want to speak to especially help understand folks who are here to do First Communion, how this kind of looks for you, whether you're doing it online or here in person again. So to start off, what does family faith formation look like for the year? Family faith formation primarily consists in these, in helping prepare parents to know their faith better so they can share and also just share and grow in the faith as a family at home with their kiddos. To do that, we have these pretty awesome materials from Sophia Institute Press. You might recognize these if you were with us last year. They're these purple A Family of Faith books. If you already have them at home and you don't need new ones for this year, great. You can just use those. Otherwise, I'll be happy to provide them to you as part of that, the registration process. So using those books as kind of our curriculum, we are going to do one, for those of us joining in person, one in-person class per month. When we're doing that, we'll have our kiddos do Children's Liturgy of the Word downstairs with the larger groups as we have them. And adults will be upstairs working with me in the worship space of the church, doing kind of what we're doing right now. Now, once you've attended that one meeting per month, which will be detailed to you in a monthly schedule that I can send to you every month so you know when to come and what you need to do, there will be also 2 times per month when we'd ask you to join in from 6:30 to 7 on a Wednesday night to get the first half of this work here that we're doing in the worship space with the adults. If you can join in at home using our Google Meeting, just join in, participate that way, just to keep your faith growing, kind of a brief snippet to work on at home. During that time, we will begin exploring some of the activities and things we can do in these Purple, A Family of Faith books so that we can share our faith with children at home and just get better at explaining the teachings of the faith that maybe we as adults sometimes don't know as well as we would like to know. So that ties into the next phase of the month. That's where we do 2 activities per month out of these books. There's like a ton of things to do in these. You can pick and choose from a lot of different options, but I'm going to prescribe 2 that are especially well related to what we're doing here in person, just so that you can, focus on 2 things to do per month. And that culminates in turn, in the end, in a video reflection that we'll do using the Flipgrid app for parents. This is a way that no matter how far out you are distance learning wise, or whether you're here in person, we can engage in some sort of face-to-face community even over video pieces. We'll be reflecting on how those activities went, those 2 activities that were earlier prescribed. So that's kind of the core structure of how Family Faith Formation is going to work this year. Again, all of that will be detailed in a monthly checklist that I'll send out to you at the start of each month so that you know what's coming your way. First Communion then is kind of in addition to that. For those of you for whom First Communion applies and you have a child preparing for First Communion in the coming year, there will be 1 Wednesday a month when we'll have all of our First Communion families here. Who are here in person anyways. If you're at distance learning for First Communion, don't worry, you can still stay at distance for that. I'll get to that in a moment. 1 First Communion class per month, that's the same as that adult meeting that you would do otherwise. Likewise, there will be 1 additional assignment specifically for First Communion online through our Seesaw class app. So you see we have 2 apps that we're really using this year to drive our programs, those being Seesaw and Flipgrid. And that's kind of what the in-person looks like. So again, a once a month meeting in person and then some homework offline to do otherwise. If you are here seeking First Communion, next week would be the time definitely to come back, because according to our schedule, then First Communion kicks off on September 16th for in-person classes. So be sure to come to the church at 6:30 if you're here looking for First Communion. So what if you're at a distance? What if you're learning, preparing for Family Faith Formation at a distance? Well, the reason why we chose to do Faith Formation this way this year is to make sure that we're flexible to meet people where they're at, and to make sure that in the event of an emergency, we can easily switch to online learning. So rather than that once a month in-person adult class, just make attendance at all 3 of the webinars, these 3 presentations online. Likewise, there will be the same 2 activities prescribed. There will be the same parent reflection online as well. So pretty similar, pretty connected there. Likewise with the First Communion, right? We just take that 1 activity that we would be doing in person, that 1 lesson, move it online with the same resources, and instead of 1 activity on Seesaw, it becomes 2 activities on Seesaw. So we have working for a pretty good parity and similarity between both First Communion and Family Faith Formation online and in person. In the event of an outbreak of COVID, for example, we will be going cohort by cohort to a distance learning model as advised by the Campbell County Public Health until advised otherwise. So that's kind of the protocol we follow there. And if at any point in time you would like to switch from distance learning to in-person learning, or from in-person learning to distance learning, please let me know. We'd be happy to accommodate you and your family's needs as best we can. So hopefully now that gives you a better idea of where we are and what we're going to be doing this year. As we go through this year then, and as we keep walking forward with this, one of my major themes for this year is that that we're all trying to grow in our faith journey, and oftentimes we just don't know where to start. A lot of the time, it's a matter of just not knowing the right question to ask. So as we go through this year, that's probably given all of us a lot of questions about faith, about life, about how things are going. Family faith formation for adults especially, while we're up here in these adult groups, is going to focus on answering the big questions about life and doing so through the lens of our faith. So where are you in your faith journey right now? Are you where you want to be? Do you even know how you would describe your faith journey right now? Does it matter to you? One of the tools that I like for using for kind of collecting information and communicating with folks during presentations is called Pear Deck. It is a software tool that if you've joined online, you've probably got going. Otherwise, I'd invite you, if you're in person, to pull out your cell phone, open your web browser and go to joinpd.com. And type in this little code up here, and oh, my laser pointer doesn't work, up there in the corner. Flash it big there, HIMNM, joinpd.com, enter that code, and then once you do so, you're able to respond to questions that I put in slides. It's kind of a fun way to get to hear from more people in the class than I would if I just got to call on hands. And certainly while we have folks participating at home at the same time as folks in person, it's a good way to kind of bring the two together in a different way. So I've got one of those questions coming up here. So as we prepare to move on to that slide, it looks different whether you're in person or whether you're on your phone or on your computer. On your phone, there's a little green answer button at the bottom of your phone. On your computer, a text box pops up next to the presentation slide that you'd be able to enter into. So entered the code, ready to go. Here comes the first question. In Pear Deck, I invite you to think for a minute or two and then respond. For those in person as well, just go ahead and think on this one. Prepare to respond in Pear Deck if you're able to with that right now. How would you define the word faith? What is it for you right now? Take just a couple minutes to think, write your definition on that. So the other fun part about Pear Deck is that I'm able to show some of the things that people are thinking about these ideas, and it all comes across anonymously. So talking Catholic faith, talking about belief. Faith is trust in God. Start to pick up on some common elements here, right? Thank you for spelling that out as an equation. Trusting, knowing, believing equals faith. Yeah, so this is something I'll like to do with Pear Deck every now and then, just to show you some of the ideas of what's going on in their class, and from there being able to, I don't know, maybe adjust some of your own ideas or say, huh, that's a cool idea. I like what you had to say about that. So the church also gives us some ideas on what faith is, on how to define faith. Faith is, in the words of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, man's response to God who reveals himself and gives himself to man. That's an awful big and lofty answer. I don't know that it does me much particular good if I'm looking to define what faith is. Sorry, Catechism of the Catholic Church, I have a different set of standards on this one. So if faith is, what is faith in the first place? Why should we respond in faith to God if we have, if this is what we're supposed to do? If this is how the church defines faith, why should we act in that way? And what does that look like in our daily life? This will bring us to our next question then. So I hope you're brainstorming and thinking on this next one. What does faith look like in daily life? If faith is a response, what does that look like? Or what does this response look like? Why should we respond like that? One way attack this problem then, as I'm asking myself this question, thinking through this, let's look at a related word to see if we can't make some headway on what faith means in the first place. Faithfulness, for example. So, like I said, thinking to where do you see faith lived out? Where do you see faithfulness lived out? Think on this question and then again respond in Pear Deck. And I'll show some of what your guys are thinking as well on the screens here in just a moment. Sorry about that, folks. I hear I've been crackling and cutting in and out. I'll be working on fixing that and being more still in a moment. Thank you. So, faithfulness, following through, following God. Deleted response. Oh, come on. I like your thoughts. No need to be shy about that. Life in general, knowing that things will be taken care of. Marriage and family. Those are definitely two great places where you see faithfulness lived out. Now, being loyal, spreading God's word, there's a lot of different directions this is going, right? What on earth is faithfulness? You can probably see some common trends, though. I want to add to this the idea that God gives us an image of faith and what faithfulness looks like in the Bible. And it's something that I think we can learn from and aspire to. I'm looking at a passage here that comes out of Exodus chapter 34. It's going to be a passage we kind of focus on for a couple of weeks here because it has so much to do with our faith and who we believe that God is. The Lord, a God gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in love and fidelity, continuing his love for 1,000 generations and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. This passage comes out of Scripture right at a point where God is telling Israel, who has just messed up like Israel does all the time, who he is. God is revealing his deepest self to them, and he gives this long list of attributes, which includes love and fidelity. Now, I'm a nerd. I like to break open the Hebrew words on some of these things because I think they can be very illuminating and sometimes shocking to our entrenched mindsets of what faith is. In particular, 3 words for this passage: ve'emeth, natsar, and chesed. I believe I pronounced those all right. There's some Hebrew scholar out there turning over in his grave because I cannot pronounce Hebrew. Save my life. The first word, fidelity. Hebrew emeth also means firmness. Like you talk about the rocks or the ground under your feet as being firm. And it's also related to the word for truth in Hebrew. So it's firm, it's honest, it's true, it's real. You can't be faithful to something that isn't real. You can't be faithful to a lie. Continuing, it's a verb in Hebrew that means to watch, guard, or keep. Why they translated it as continued, I'm not sure, because I feel like keep and guard are such interesting words to use to describe that. And lastly, the word chesed, which is very important, near and dear to my heart, because it pops up all over the place in the Old Testament. And Jesus describes and talks about it quite a bit in the New Testament. Chesed means goodness. It means love. It means mercy. Specifically, it means the kind of love you experience in a covenant relationship. What does a covenant relationship look like? Marriage is probably one of the most familiar covenant relationships we have. This is our doctrine as a church, is that a husband and wife married to one another are related to one another in the same way that God connects to his people. God is a God who makes a covenant with us. He comes to us and joins himself to a whole people, to his church, to Israel, in a way that looks something like a marriage. That's a weird idea. That's a weird concept. Fortunately, we've got a lot of time to unpack that this year. But I think that means something that we can gloss together for a definition of faith that is useful. If faith is man's response to God, then man's response to God, and woman's response to God for that matter, means standing firm in, growing in, cultivating, and protecting a loving and honest relationship with God. It doesn't mean putting on a mask or hiding ourselves behind something because God wants us to look a certain way. Because remember, this is firm, this is honest, it's rooted in truth, cannot be rooted in a lie. It also means it's something that we guard and protect. It's something we invest in, right? Something we cultivate and keep growing strong. And above all things, the relationship is chesed. It should look like an ideal, to a certain extent, ideal relationship between husband and wife, loving, trusting, faithful, exclusive. These are some words we would use to describe man's response, humanity's response of faith to God. And of course, if it's true of our relationship with God, it also looks good in different forms in human relationships, right? The beautiful thing about our faith is it's not just supposed to get us right with God. It's also supposed to help us grow in our relationships with one another and to become better human beings overall. So, if that's our faith to God, and we can practice faith with one another, what everyday relationships do you want to strive to be faithful to? How will you grow and guard them? This is a Pear Deck response. This is just, again, anonymous things. If you've got some ideas or thoughts to share on this, awesome. Just want to hear your initial thoughts on what does faithfulness look like in your everyday life. This is our last question slide for this presentation, and then a little bit of closing business, and then we'll wrap up. So just a couple minutes to consider and write up. Some thoughts that people are throwing up there. Not throwing up, I hope. That'd be kind of weird, but putting on the board. Be kind. That sounds like a motto to live by. If we can pause that scroll for a second. I love this response. God, spouse, family, I will grow them by dedicating more time to them. Time is hard right now, especially with COVID stuff. The fact that you're choosing to be on this presentation right now and to be investing in some form in your own faith life and the faith life of your family, I want to honor and recognize, because you're sacrificing something to be here. Thank you for entrusting your time to me. My promise to you is that I'm going to do everything in my power to make this a useful use of your time and honor you as you're honoring me with your presence and attention. So thank you for being here and being involved tonight. Okay, so family, God, faith, things that we can stay faithful to. I encourage you to take this and kind of ponder with this in the week ahead. How are you practicing faithful relationships? How are you guarding and growing and cultivating those in the time ahead? Next week, as we start up with our first class for the first communion cohort, so there should be a good gaggle of folks here all in person next week, we're going to start tackling a question to build on this week. Why should we be faithful to God? Because now that we know what faith is, God doesn't just get to be the guy we're faithful to. We choose our husband, we choose our wife, we choose a lot of the people in our lives. Why should we be faithful to God, who we don't necessarily get to choose to be in our life, because he's just kind of there? The Old Testament and the New Testament both have contributions to make on this. So in our parent presentation next week, we will explore this question. So again, next week, First Communion families will be here in person, 6:30 to 7:45 here in person. After this presentation ends next week, we will have some activities, some prayer time for families, for the parents, maybe some time to set aside for quiet for yourself if you're not getting any of that these days, because it's good for the soul. This presentation next week will be different than the one it was tonight. So don't worry if you're tuning in at home, you're not going to get a redundant adult presentation. If you haven't already, if you don't have a copy of those purple Family of Faith books, I invite you to pick those up at the parish office, either if you're doing the distance learning thing, or if you're going to be here next week, we'll have them here next week. So you can pick them up then. And lastly, on your personal schedule, if you haven't received a family schedule for family faith formation at this point in time, I will make sure to get that sent out to you. Please email me if you don't have one. You should also have a Flipgrid sign-in code. Using that, you can get into our class Flipgrid, join in, and from there, complete the icebreaker assignment. So at this time, I'd invite you, we're gonna end the recording on our presentation here in a moment. Please enter your family name in Pear Deck and any program questions you still have. That family name will let me know who to reach out to. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I hope you have a blessed rest of your night.